Welcome to the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev, where we explore and share experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week from across the games industry, helping you make the best game you can. Stay tuned for today's episode. Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring you experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I actually scratched that. Hold on. Sam, which company is yours? Goblin or Psychic?
Psychic.
Aha, I was going to say the other way around.
Yep.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep.
Psychic. Okay, that's fine. I'll do that again.
Okay.
Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring you experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I'm joined with Sam Redfern from Psychic Software and Jonas Robertsson from Goblin Portal to discuss their first game as a collaboration of two studios, Goblins and Grottos. Sam and Jonas, talk about yourself first, please, and how you both got into the games industry.
Jonas first?
Yeah, you can go first.
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
I've been making games since the 1980s. I'm not actually a full-time game developer. I'm a university lecturer. But as I say, I've been making games since the 1980s. I've been making them a lot for the last 10 years. So I've a lot of mobile phone games and PC games and Mac games, all kinds of stuff made as Psychic Software. How I got into it is what I've always done. I guess as a teenager, I was a hobbyist programmer, and it never stopped. Making games has always been my life.
Cool. And yourself, Jonas?
Yeah. So I'm more from the e-commerce business side. So that's what I've worked with most, and this is something new for me, the game industry. So basically, what e-commerce, that's just building stores, brands, and marketing and stuff like that. And working with games, that's been something that's been done besides work. So yeah, it's basically me.
Cool, a nice little team we got going off here.
Yep. There's actually four in the team. You mentioned three earlier. There's four of us.
Yeah.
Well, I remember seeing in the credits of the game there was three.
Okay. Well, there was one smaller, but we didn't have a picture of him yet. We have a musician as well, Ian Munt.
Aha. That's all right. So speaking of a team, so there's four people, and what's the structure, and what's the workflow?
I'll talk about the structure maybe, and Jonas talk about the workflow. The structure is I'm the programmer. Jonas is the I suppose the interface designer and the level designer more than anything. His brother Bjorn is the main graphic artist, and there's another Irish guy, Ian, who's the musician and audio guy. So I suppose it's a fairly good split of work between us. Jonas is very good at structure, so he can talk about that.
Yeah. So yeah, about structure, that's kind of how. What are you asking for?
Sorry, workflow, was it? Workflow.
Workflow, yeah. So
yes.
Basically, how we work right now, or how we set it up, or what's the question?
What's happening in the workflow of the game? Is it just constantly making the new levels and the new art, or is it a case of building the engine entirely from scratch, or what's happening?
Yeah, well, the engine is fairly built, right, Sam?
Yeah, although it was built from scratch.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the structure of that, I guess you're better at explaining the structure behind the more.
Oh yeah, I can talk about the engine. Yeah, for sure. Okay. It's basically web technologies. So it's HTML5, JavaScript, WebGL. It's essentially like a website, but even though it doesn't look like one. It's just a set of technologies that I find work very well for me. I spent a lot of years doing 3D games, using kind of proper game engines. So I'm finding I'm really enjoying working without game engines and working just building everything myself. So that's the kind of technology side of it.
Cool. I think that's a very, very strong way to go, where you're not relying on other people.
Yeah, there's pros and cons. Pros and cons to
as
do.
regards to definitely as regards to engines.
Yeah.
So tell me about your latest game then. Or in this case, the first game is a collaboration, Goblins and Grottos. and what you wanted the player to experience.
Yeah, should we like what we started with, what we started talking to together was like, let's create a really small game together, something simple, and that's kind of what we started with, and it's kind of grown and become like, I don't know how to explain it in English, but how would it feel to be like on the other side? The typical game where the hero is slaying all the monster, earning experience and stuff like that. How would it feel to be the goblin instead, and filled with a world of greedy heroes and stuff like that?
Mm.
So I think it will be fun for the player to just experience the other side of it. And it's kind of hard also to develop this, to think in another way, like turning everything around. And yeah, I'm just it's gonna be awesome. I just think that. And it's also gonna be because we got a humor in the game also, and I think that's also gonna be something that's also gonna be related to gamers. So guess our kind of focus group is kind of towards gamers, and yeah.
I really like how in the game the checkpoints have a certain amount of uses.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of fun because that probably make the game a little harder, like more hardcore game, and that's just more fun to play.
Yeah, what it means is the player still is scared of being killed. This is something when we released our first alpha version, there was no checkpoints, and it was extremely obvious from anyone doing playthroughs. It was actually, I was cringing watching them playing it.
Yeah.
But it was obvious that the fear of being killed is a good thing. So it's
Yeah.
kind of an in between. There's kind of 3 lives on each checkpoint.
Cool, fear of being killed. I can understand that. Well, everyone has that.
Yeah.
You don't see that very often, where the player is almost punished when they die. It tends to be just a case of reload or restart the level or something like that. But I find that those 3 checkpoints really,
Yeah.
when I discovered it first went, I was like, wow, that's an interesting mechanic, and it's like really, really not dissuading me, but really a real deterrent from dying and really getting the game completed without dying and doing it properly and without messing around and risking from different heights and just falling down these holes that go straight into spikes.
Yeah. I think it will be rewarding for the player to just finish the game without doing anything wrong, like the old times where you had to finish the game or you had to restart the whole map, and we're kind of close to that with that.
Yeah, I think the
lowering.
maps are too hard. I think to leave it as
Yeah.
as simple as that. Yeah.
A little bit hard. I wouldn't have thought too hard, but a little bit difficult. Nothing too challenging.
Yeah. It's a casual
But
game.
yeah, exactly. But speaking of challenging, how is it you guys went about promoting the game, and what strategies worked and what didn't work so well?
We haven't done very much yet. I mean, the game's only kind of in its alpha release. We've only been making it since March or April. As Eunice said, we started off not even knowing each other, so we wanted to do something quite simple and quite tangible within a couple of months, and that went extremely well. We actually released our alpha onto Greenlight, and we got Greenlit in 4 days, and just absolutely fabulous feedback. So that's why we're moving forward into a full product. Promotion really hasn't really existed yet. A little bit of tweeting, a little bit of kind of indie DB type stuff. We're yet to have been noticed really by anyone with influence, other than I suppose on Steam Greenlight we've been noticed, but that's about it. But we'll get there, I hope.
Yeah, we'll get there.
Oh.
And Greenlight was probably the one that gave us most boost, because it was really fun to just read all the comments, and positive feedback was just great.
Yeah. Well, I've been releasing games for many years, and I have to say the comments on this have been the most positive I've ever seen. Of course, you always see positive comments, but they're usually tempered by negative ones. But there was an almost total absence of negative comments. I think people just got the joke and they liked it, and of course the art is fantastic. So,
And is that the main way you got feedback for the game, purely based off green light comments via Steam?
I've brought it to a couple of small expos. So where you might have 100 or 200 people just coming past and casually trying it. So we've got useful feedback from that.
And is that also how you went about QAing the game, when just people purely played the game when you realised bugs, or you found bugs, whether it was through Let's Plays or just watching it live?
Yeah, a bit of both, and of course ourselves as well. Jonas and Bjorn are both very good at finding bugs. So I don't get away with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm curious then, how is it you're going about funding the game, and what worked and what didn't work so well?
Well, I guess we're funding it by ourselves, basically.
Yes, it's part time for all of us. We all have jobs, so it doesn't need funding really.
Okay, I get you. So thus far then, because it's in alpha still at the moment, what is the best game dev purchase you've made? Whether it was a software license, a top quality piece of hardware or equipment, or simply a comfortable chair, good desk, and a second monitor.
I bought a nice Xbox controller, it's a green glowing controller, which I brought to an expo, and it was quite effective at catching people's eye. It's the perfect green glowing color, really, as part of the branding of the game, of course, the Goblin.
Yeah.
So it just that's probably the only purchase I've made, so it's also the best one.
Yeah, I actually have to say that I did buy a second screen, and it's just awesome.
A lot of real estate when it comes to space.
Yeah, it's needed. I don't know how I live without it. I have it at work, but I need it at home also.
Oh, very good. So, are there any game dev related books, lectures, or learning resources that you can recommend?
Ooh, for this type of game,
Or in general, books you've ever come across, anything worthwhile before?
well, I spent quite a bit of time, as I say, making games on mobile. Before, I suppose I've got kind of negative about it. Um, it's very difficult. It's a very difficult market to make mobile games. You have to be very lucky or have big marketing. Um, and I think the game players, your target audience, are not necessarily game players. They're just people that want something to pass the time, and that makes them very, very different to people on Steam who really are game players and want to play games and talk about games and read about games. So back when I was doing mobile, yeah, there was some good stuff I read. I'm actually a friend of a guy who consults on this stuff. He's called Nicholas Lavelle, and he's one of the leading guys on trying to free to play stuff. He was I suppose putting together a lot of the theories of this a few years ago. So he's got a good book called The Curve. And there's other books about kind of how to make free games and make money from them and stuff like this.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
But that's all in my past, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I much more enjoy making PC games, which is what I've been doing for the last 2 years or so.
Extraordinary. So, Jonas, is there no resource that you can recommend?
Well, yeah, it's really hard. I guess you could read something. If I'm gonna talk about something else, you could actually go read something totally different. I would tell something about storytelling and comic design. That's something really different, but would probably help in creating that. It's closely related to video and producing, and that's helping you do storytelling in game and so on. Maybe that's just another point of view, looking at it like, okay, I can read this and learn something from that and take that into game development.
Definitely learning things outside of games and
Yeah,
just taking outside information.
yeah, exactly.
Definitely, I agree with that.
Yep.
So, like an Evernote or Trello, do you have a useful or productivity enhancing software, app, extension, or website worth sharing?
Yeah, well, we do actually use Trello. We started using it, I don't know, not far from. We've been using it for 5 weeks, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And we use Dropbox, of course, to share files. And Trello has been working quite well for us, I think.
Yeah.
It's simple enough to just get everything down there, what needs to be done.
Yeah, I suppose we've. It took us a few weeks, but we've got a structure in our Trello project that works for us, where you've basically each got a column of stuff that you own, and that gives you a very clear task list. And when you've finished an item in the task list, there's a very clear place to drag it to, which is somebody else's task list. And there's a flow from left to right. So the stuff generally kind of bubbles across left to right, and it goes through art to coding to audio, and then it kind of goes to the finished column. So it's worked well for us like that. So I suppose for a small team.
Yeah.
And that's great to know. It worked well for me about a year or so ago when I was working on a game and we used that. Brilliant. So, Sam Redfern and Jonas Robertsson, what advice, Sam and Jonas, what advice can you give to aspiring game developers, small indie studios, and people trying to get to where you are today?
I would say make something original. Like if you're trying to make a small game, there's absolutely no point doing it if it doesn't have a big slice of originality, because you can't compete with other people with bigger budgets, bigger ideas, bigger skills. But if you make something original, you really can make something good, and that's probably the single most important thing. And I suppose enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, there's no point. Yeah, that'd be my advice.
Yeah. And trying to motivate yourself to keep going. Because it's very devastating, because I've been in projects where the key persons, someone drops out after like months or years of work. And that's really devastating. And that's probably because of motivation or the lack of trust of that this will not work and so on. And it will always be in a project. It will be the grind thing, I guess, after a while. And people tend to get bored. But just hang in there, I guess, and keep on working. I think that's a good idea.
After speaking to loads of other game developers, I came up with a phrase saying that if you don't enjoy the game you're making, if you won't play the game, then people won't pay for the game. So it kind of ties in nicely with what you said, Sam.
Yep.
So, gentlemen, what is next for you, and what's the best way to contact you?
Next for us is many months of work to finish our game, because it's quite early. The best way to contact us, email, I suppose, or Twitter. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Very cool. So, unfortunately, gentlemen, it appears that we're out of time for this episode of the Daily Dev Talk. It was great talking to you both, Jonas and Sam. Plenty to think about, like getting a glowing green controller, help attract people at what they call, not concerts, conventions.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you said about originality, because it's something way beyond the box and the triangle and the rectangle and all the rest, going way outside of it. And in this case, I like the idea because you're a goblin. You're playing as a goblin, so how cool is that? And a 2D aspect as well. Plus, you also can climb on walls. That's pretty cool. Game mechanic in general. So I wish you well on future endeavors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So stay tuned, Overload Nation. More videos to come. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev. If you are a game developer that wants to get your name and game out there, and to share your experiences and stories, or you have feedback or opinions of the show, then contact me at info@gameoverload.co.uk. That's info@gameoverload.co.uk. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode, more to come.